Hello and welcome to Coffee with Craig, where we talk about all things firearms, firearms policy, politics, culture, media, you name it. We talk about it right here on Coffee with Craig every Monday through Friday. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for liking and sharing the program and letting your friends know that this is the spot to be in as we talk about firearms. Also, please take a moment, visit fpcgear.com. There you will find all sorts of cool pro-Second Amendment swag that will amaze your friends. The great thing about it is that every dollar that you spend goes right back into the work that we do here at the Firearms Policy Coalition so that you can support the Second Amendment and you can look good doing it. That's fpcgear.com. Talk about fighting for our rights. You know, this year has probably seen the introduction of more anti-gun legislation across the country in states than any year that I can think of. Any years that since I've been doing this. And we're seeing it happen in a number of different states. We've already talked a little bit about what's going on at the federal level. I've given you kind of a glimpse as to stuff that's been proposed here in the state of California. I've talked to you guys about Oregon, about a really bad bill in Oregon. Well, a state that I think, I never really thought of Oregon as an anti-gun state. In fact, when it was rated by Guns and Ammo, the last rating that I saw pretty much put them probably in the lower third of middle to lower third of states in terms of their laws supporting the Second Amendment. That actually kind of surprised me. But knowing that, now that I know that, what's really surprising me is the onslaught. I mean, we're talking the massive numbers and the severity of some of the anti-gun legislation that's being proposed right now in the state of New Mexico. Here's a little story that was done on it, and it'll kind of give you kind of a preview of what we're going to talk a little bit about today.
Just a month before the upcoming legislative session begins, the bills are flowing in. With the Democrats firmly in control in the Roundhouse, gun control will be front and center. Here's News 13's Rachel Knapp with a look.
Gun laws and gun sales have been a reoccurring topic across the country and right here in New Mexico. In the run-up to the state legislative session, state Democratic Senators Richard Martinez and Peter Worth have filed a bill that would make it harder to buy a gun. It says if guns are privately sold, the buyer must go through a federal background check, and if the gun is sold without one, the buyer and seller could be charged with a misdemeanor. And a House bill proposed by Democratic Representative Miguel Garcia calls for background checks for buyers at gun shows.
Well, I'm for it.
It's intrusive. That's the problem with this bill.
Locals we spoke with have different opinions.
And the reality is it doesn't stop or curb any kind of gun violence whatsoever.
Andy Montoya, a firearms trainer and NRA member, says these laws aren't necessary because criminals will still get their hands on guns.
They're selling these guns. They're selling them for pennies on the dollar out in the street, in the black market. They're not going to go to a gun show and spend full price, $500 for your average medium-sized gun when they can buy a stolen one on the street for $100.
Others think the bills would help deter crime.
And they can say, you know what, going through this background check, I don't really feel comfortable. I'm not going to sell this gun.
But both sides of this divisive topic agree New Mexico needs to lower gun violence.
So this universal background loophole thing it's a farce, and it's not going to save anybody.
I mean, I think there's just too much violence in the United States with guns, and we need to somehow have stricter laws about it.
Rachel Knapp, KRQE News 13.
What isn't clear in these bills is how law enforcement would know if someone sells a gun without requiring a background check. We reached to the three state lawmakers behind the proposed gun laws. None of them got back to us.
Well, of course they're not going to get back to you because they don't know how exactly they're going to be enforced because, quite frankly, they're probably very, very ignorant as to how the law actually works. They're ignorant as to how firearm purchases work, and they don't really care because their whole goal is, I want to stand up and be anti-gun, and I want to get my name in the media, and I want to be in a part of a news story, and that's exactly what they got here. So, needless to say, they accomplished exactly what they set out to do. Now, let's talk about some of these bills and exactly what they do. Okay, so let's start off with, let's see here. All right, so first we have House Bill and Senate Bill 8. Now, these are both, they're kind of companion bills, but they both basically do the same exact thing. And they would make it unlawful to purchase or sell a firearm without a federal background check, meaning every firearm transaction you make will be recorded in a government database. Now, that's an important thing to understand, because one of the things that these things are being used for, the background checks are being used for, is a pseudo registration. In other words, they're trying to register your firearm, because that way the government will know when you've purchased a firearm and what firearm you've purchased. And that's, in the end, what their whole goal is with background checks, is not so much that they want to keep guns out of the hands of bad guys, because, as we all know, 96% of the crimes that have been committed, at least these are according to federal statistics, most of the guns that are found at crime scenes or used in crimes were not purchased by the person who perpetrated the crime, meaning they're either stolen or they're trafficked. But people, for the most part, who are legally buying guns are not people who are committing crimes, because they're generally not the registered owners of those firearms. So that's that first piece of legislation. Okay, then we've got another piece of legislation. Let's see if I can get this one up here. Okay, that one's not going to pop up. What is going on here? Here we go. And then that's the old one, and then we'll bring up another one. There we go. Okay, now we have HB 35, which would put extreme burden on gun stores by requiring them to verify with the Department of Safety that every firearm that they purchase isn't stolen. Now, I'm not sure exactly how they're supposed to do this. I don't think that they provide any real information in terms of helping people to understand exactly how they are supposed to do this. Once again, I don't know how exactly they're supposed to determine whether or not the firearm is stolen. And I don't know that, once again, even in talking with the media hasn't told them how they're supposed to determine whether or not a firearm is stolen or not. Remember, background checks, even at the federal level, haven't been around forever. So the idea of being able to track firearms, and many states don't have a way in which to track firearms. So how exactly they're supposed to do that? And then, once again, keep in mind, this isn't just about tracking stolen firearms, because, once again, the problem has never been, or at least as far as we know, the problem isn't firearms retailers selling stolen firearms. It's people buying stolen firearms. And usually they're buying stolen firearms from people who stole it. So I don't understand exactly what problem it is that they're trying to solve here, but clearly they're not going to be solving it with HB 35. Okay, now we've got HB 40, would ban private purchase or sale of firearms at gun shows. This bill would empower the government to track every firearm you buy or sell. All right, so this one, once again, is a take on the first two bills, only this one specifically targets gun shows. They call it closing the quote-unquote gun show loophole, requiring background checks to purchase a firearm. Once again, every poll, every research ever done will tell you that criminals are not getting firearms at gun shows. They're not. And I don't understand why this is an issue, but it's clearly already been proven that gun shows are not the source of crime guns. Yet and still, once again, they want to regulate this. Here's another one. HB 83 would put in place the ERPO, which is their Extreme Risk Protection Order gun confiscation scheme that exists in anti-gun states like California. Simply put, this bill would allow broadly defined household members to petition for the ex parte confiscation of your guns without due process. Now, let's be clear. Understand what ex parte means. Ex parte means you don't get to be there, meaning one of the parties isn't there. In fact, one of the parties doesn't even know that this hearing is taking place. So a quote-unquote loosely defined quote-unquote household member someone who may have an issue with you, someone may be an immediate family member or something along those lines who has an issue with you, someone else can go to a court without you knowing about it, without your knowledge, without you having the ability to defend yourself, and claim that you are a danger to yourself or others. Judge then issues an extreme risk protection order. The law enforcement is then told to go confiscate your weapons. They show up at your door and tell you, yeah, you've been deemed a danger to yourself or others, and we're here to take your guns. Now, this is a program where where they've confiscated guns from people because they said something that people didn't like on Facebook and social media. We've had one individual who's actually lost his life by resisting one of these extreme risk protection orders, this guns confiscation program. We have states like Broward County, where the sheriff has just been suspended by the governor there in Florida. But they had 450 of these instituted in the first 2 months that they were in place in Florida. 400 of them by the sheriff of Broward County. Needless to say, he's a bit anti-gun. But you're going to see anti-gun sheriffs who are going to push these things. And once again, no due process. You are found. You don't get to defend yourself. You lose your rights. Eventually, you get to go to court. But when you do go to court, you are guilty until proven innocent, and you got to get a lawyer. You may have to get a mental health professional. You have to come out of pocket to prove that you are not a danger to yourself or others simply because someone else said that you were. That's how bad HB 83 is. Now, we've got HB 87, which would expand the definition of prohibited persons far beyond convicted felons. Now, I say this to folks whenever they ask me about bills that expand or include misdemeanor convictions. In this country, right, we have things that are called serious crimes. If you're going to lose your rights, right, if you're going to lose fundamental rights, it ought to only happen when you are convicted of a serious crime. And we call those serious crimes in this country felonies. Now, not all felonies are violent crimes, mind you. But yet and still, if you are a convicted felon, you do then lose your right to keep and bear arms. So why should you lose your right for a minor crime? Well, this one expands it to include misdemeanors. Now, my attitude is, if a crime is so bad, if it's so bad that you ought to lose your fundamental rights, well, guess what? It shouldn't be a misdemeanor. It should be a felony. But once again, the Democratic lawmakers, and I say Democratic lawmakers because those are the only ones, at least in this particular state, that are supporting this kind of legislation. All right, moving right along. HB 129. HB 129 gives special rights to legislatively defined special people. Retired government employees do not have any more right to carry a gun than you. Now, we've seen this happen here in the state of California, where in order to gain the support of law enforcement, they exempt retired law enforcement. They exempt law enforcement and or retired law enforcement officers. So this would give retired, let me say this one more time, retired, not those who are actively serving as law enforcement, but retired law enforcement officers the ability to carry in places where other law-abiding citizens or concealed carry permit holders would not be able to carry. And I don't understand that because a retired law enforcement officer doesn't have any more arrest powers than you or I do. They have no more, absolutely positively, no more ability or right to arrest somebody that you or I do. Yet and still they get special rights. First of all, they're called civil rights for a reason. Right? The right to keep and bear arms. Bear arms is a civil right, right? It's not a special right for special people. It's a civil right, meaning it's for all of us. Every single one of us should have access to that right, and it should not be taken away. That's why HB 129 is it's bad juju. Okay. HB 130 would essentially require firearms to be locked and stored away in households with minors. This would effectively restrict you from accessing your firearm when you need them, when you need the most to protect your loved ones. Now, I'm a believer in safely storing your firearms. Yes, I am. But I believe that when you get to the point where you have people who know absolutely nothing about firearms trying to tell you what constitutes safe storage, like you have people who are promoting safety programs that say you should store your firearms separately from your ammunition. How exactly are you supposed to use that firearm in order to be able to defend yourself or defend your family if someone breaks into your house if your ammunition is nowhere near your firearm? You have some people who even say that the firing pin should be taken out and stored in a separate place. No, absolutely positively not. Should you be promoting safe storage? Yes, you should. Should we be mandating their ignorant version of what they deem to be safe storage? Absolutely, positively not. That is a bad idea. HB 130, once again, bad idea. Okay, now we've got SB 201, which would essentially require background checks for all firearm transfers, even at gun shows and among family members. So, in other words, if this would cover all of the bills, the whether it's the gun show bill or it's the firearm purchase bill, any transfer. So even if you're not purchasing it, but you're just transferring it, maybe I'm transferring the firearm to my son or to my daughter or to my wife, it would require a background check. Whether I'm doing it at a gun show, once again, it will require a background check. This is how, once again, how they plan on tracking firearms, how they plan on creating a registry. So once again, should the government decide that they want to ban all of your guns, they'll know exactly where to go. So, yeah, no. And that's, ultimately that's the biggest issue with all of these background check laws is that they've turned them into pseudo registration. And that's the biggest issue. The other issue is, quite frankly, it doesn't work. And they found that the background check system doesn't work even right here in the state of California because, well, guess what? Criminals don't buy their guns legally. I know. Crazy thought, huh? That they don't buy their guns legally. But, hey, for some reason, the anti-gun left or Democrats seem to think that, criminals are more law-abiding than law-abiding citizens. Go figure. Now, although it is not lost, there is actually one pro-gun bill that's been introduced so far in the state of New Mexico, and that is HB 101. It's a Pro 2A bill that expedites the process for obtaining carry permits and eases the process of renewing them. Once again, a right ought to be easily accessible. You should not be required to jump through multiple governmental hoops. It should not be made more expensive for an individual to be able to exercise a fundamental constitutional right. Simple enough, and that's why I, once again, big believers, big supporters in HB 101. So, folks, as you can see, there is a lot. There's a lot there. There's a lot that's going on in the state of New Mexico. I know that most of you don't live in New Mexico, but you know what? You still need to make sure that your voice is heard because trust me, this stuff is traveling. New Mexico they are trying to get New Mexico to join the West Coast wall of gun control. And New Mexico is not the only state. We'll eventually be talking about Arizona. We'll be talking about Texas. We'll be talking about a bunch of different states where they are introducing anti-gun legislation. And trust me, they're not just pulling this stuff out of nowhere. Every town has researched, they have done polling, they have done PR campaigns in all of these places. They know that they have a shot to pass this stuff. Otherwise, they wouldn't be pushing it or introducing it. So because we know that, we need to make sure that we put up a fight. And I don't care what state you're in. I don't care where you are. These are the states that are the front lines in the fight for our right to keep and bear arms. You guys need to be active and engaged. How can you do that? Follow the link in the description of this video to firearmspolicy.org/actions. You'll see all the legislation that's been introduced thus far from all of the various different states. And you can make your voice heard on every single one with a simple click of a button. Once again, that's fpc.org/actions, or just go to fpc.org and click on the Take Action tab or the Actions tab. Folks, we need you guys to be engaged and when we go to these states, when we walk in the door, what makes it even better is when you guys have had your voice because they know who we are because you guys have announced our presence before we ever get there. So we need your help. Once again, take a few minutes and take action on these bills. Help the people in the state of New Mexico fight for their right to keep and bear arms. Remember, this is a fight for our civil rights. We got to use them or we're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.